actually hit her in the back of the head, right where your spine is. Because he was telling me, he was like, if you hit right there, like just one like good hit, you can just knock the person out and then they'll be dead. And she was like pretending to be dead for a while. I would see that she was still breathing and I'll be like, Johnny, she's still alive. What the heck? And then like Johnny finally like made the like last blow, and it was kind of creepy because she was like scared.
In April 2017, the quiet suburb of Lawrenceville, Georgia, a place where people left their doors unlocked and children played freely in the streets, was torn apart by a crime so brutal, so unimaginable, that it sent shockwaves through every home in the community. Lawrenceville was the kind of town where everyone knew each other, where life moved at a gentle pace, and where violence seemed like something that happened far away, in bigger cities with bigger problems. But that illusion of safety was shattered when two beloved grandparents, Wendy and Randall Bjorge, were found dead in their own house, their lives stolen in a way that defied comprehension. What made this case even more devastating, even more impossible to grasp, was the identity of their killers. It wasn't a stranger who broke in under the cover of night. It was their own granddaughter, Cassandra Bjorge, just 17 years old, and her 19-year-old boyfriend, Johnny Rider. The people Wendy and Randall had trusted, the family they had loved, turned against them in the most horrific way possible. Today, we step into the dark and twisted story of Cassandra Bjorge and Johnny Rider, a tale that forces us to confront a chilling truth. Sometimes, the greatest danger doesn't come from the outside world. Sometimes, it comes from the very people we invite into our homes, the ones we hold closest to our hearts. Now, let's unravel how this quiet suburb became the stage for a nightmare no one saw coming. Wendy and Randall Bjorge, both 63 years old, were discovered lifeless in their modest home on Furlong Run after days of silence that alarmed their family. Normally, Wendy was the first to reply to a text or pick up a phone call, and Randall was never far behind, always eager to check in with their children or share a story about their day. So when they stopped answering, when their phones went straight to voicemail for over a week, their loved ones knew something was terribly wrong. It started with a few concerned messages, then calls to neighbors, and finally, desperate pleas for police to check on them. When officers arrived and knocked on the door, they got no response. They circled the house, peering through windows, but saw nothing out of place. It wasn't until they forced their way inside that the full horror came into view. Wendy and Randall had been beaten savagely, their throats slashed with a cold precision, their bodies left to decay in the upstairs rooms for days. The killers were no strangers passing through town. They were Cassandra Bjorge, the couple's own granddaughter, and her boyfriend, Johnny Rider. This wasn't a sudden outburst or a crime born of desperation. It was a planned, deliberate act of murder, fueled by a dangerous cocktail of teenage defiance, festering resentment, and a warped craving for freedom from the rules Wendy and Randall had tried to enforce. What began as a welfare check ended with a discovery that would haunt Lawrenceville forever. Wendy and Randall Bjorge were the kind of couple who seemed to have it all figured out. They met as high school sweethearts in Utah, their love story beginning with shy glances across a classroom and blossoming into a marriage that lasted 43 years. They raised 2 children, Amanda and Christopher, and built a life grounded in hard work and family values. Randall was a network engineer at Presidium Network Solutions, a man who took pride in solving problems and keeping the world connected. Wendy was the heart of the home, a woman who poured her energy into raising her kids and later doting on her grandchildren. They had moved to Georgia years earlier, settling into Lawrenceville to enjoy a quieter life, surrounded by neighbors who quickly became friends. Their house was always warm, filled with the smell of Wendy's cooking and the sound of Randall's laughter. When their granddaughter, Cassandra, started struggling in Duluth, clashing with her mother and spiraling into trouble, Wendy and Randall didn't hesitate to step in. They opened their doors, offering her a room, a fresh start, and the kind of love they believed could turn her life around. They enrolled her in homeschooling, set firm boundaries, and tried to guide her away from the chaos that seemed to follow her. To their neighbors, they were the perfect grandparents, always willing to help, always putting family first. But they couldn't see the darkness growing in Cassandra.
He said no. And he asked me, he was like, would you kill your grandparents? I fought them,
The resentment she harbored for their rules, their expectations. They thought they were saving her. Instead, they were bringing their own doom into their home, one quiet step at a time. The night of the murder began like any other in the Bjorge household. Wendy and Randall had turned off the lights, said goodnight, and settled into bed, trusting that their home was a safe haven. Outside, under the cover of darkness, Cassandra and Johnny waited, their hearts pounding not with fear, but with anticipation. They had talked about this for weeks, plotting every detail, choosing their moment with care. Cassandra clutched her house key, a symbol of the trust her grandparents had given her, now twisted into a tool of betrayal. When the house fell silent, she led Johnny inside, her steps quiet but purposeful. What unfolded next was a scene straight out of a horror film. Cassandra turned on her grandmother first, her fists raining down with a fury that had been building for months. Wendy, startled awake, had no time to scream before the blows left her dazed and helpless. At the same time, Johnny attacked Randall, swinging a tire iron with brutal force, each strike echoing through the stillness of the night. Randall fought to protect himself, but he was no match for the younger man's rage. Once their victims were subdued, the couple didn't stop. They bound Wendy and Randall with duct tape, their hands trembling not with guilt, but with adrenaline. Then, in a final merciless act, they took a knife and slit their throats, watching as the life drained from the people who had loved them most. For the next 7 days, Cassandra and Johnny stayed in the house, stepping over the bodies as if they were nothing more than clutter. They poured bleach over the remains to hide the stench, sealed the upstairs doors with caulk, and carried on with their lives. They invited friends over for parties, ordered Chinese takeout with the Bjorge's money, and even went shopping for new clothes, all while Wendy and Randall lay decomposing just above them. It was a chilling display of callousness, a week-long mockery of the lives they had ended. The investigation started with worry, not suspicion. Wendy and Randall's family grew uneasy when days passed without a word. Wendy's sister, Sylvia, called repeatedly, her concern mounting with each unanswered ring. Their son, Christopher, reached out to neighbors, asking if anyone had seen them. No one had. Finally, the family begged the police to step in. Officers visited the house several times, knocking on the door, calling out, but the silence was deafening. On April 8, 2017, they decided to break in, and what they found turned a welfare check into a murder investigation. Upstairs, Wendy and Randall's bodies lay in pools of dried blood, their faces frozen in terror. The smell of bleach stung the air, a clumsy attempt to cover the crime. At first, the police were baffled. Who could do this to such a kind couple? The answer came unexpectedly. Just hours earlier, Cassandra and Johnny had attacked Johnny's sister Mindy and her boyfriend Kevin, beating them with a baseball bat and stealing their car. They left the Bjorges' Mazda SUV behind, a breadcrumb that led police straight to them. When officers traced the stolen car to a friend's apartment in Suwannee, they found Cassandra and Johnny barricaded inside. A SWAT team stormed the building after a tense standoff, discovering the couple with self-inflicted stab wounds, a desperate and failed attempt to escape justice. The pieces of the puzzle snapped into place. This wasn't just a double murder. It was a spree of violence orchestrated by two teenagers who thought they could outrun the consequences. When detectives sat Cassandra down for questioning, they expected tears, maybe a breakdown. Instead, they got something far more unsettling. She spoke about the murder with a calm that chilled the room, her voice steady as she described hitting her grandmother, watching her grandfather gasp for air, and realizing they weren't dead after the first attack. She smirked at times, her eyes glinting with a strange amusement, as if she were recounting a prank instead of a slaughter. When asked why, she shrugged and said she was tired of her family, tired of their rules. There was no regret, no flicker of sorrow, just a cold emptiness that left the detectives stunned. Johnny took a different path. He sat across from the interrogators, his face blank, and immediately demanded a lawyer. He wouldn't say a word, but he didn't need to. Cassandra's confession, paired with the blood on their hands and the weapons in their possession, told the story for him. The evidence was a mountain they couldn't climb, and their silence couldn't save them. Cassandra Bjorge wasn't always a killer, but she was always troubled. Growing up in Duluth, she clashed with her mother Amanda, running away from home, skipping school, and tangling with the law. By her teens, she was a storm of rebellion, impossible to control. When Amanda couldn't handle her anymore, Wendy and Randall stepped in, hoping their love could tame her wildness. They were wrong. Cassandra saw their rules as chains, their care as control, and her anger only grew. Johnny Rider was her perfect match, a 19-year-old with a life already in ruins. He had married young, divorced even younger, and racked up a criminal record that hinted at deeper problems. Once he dreamed of joining the Marines, but a shoulder injury and his own bad decisions crushed that hope. When he met Cassandra, it was like gasoline meeting a flame. Their shared bitterness, their hunger for chaos fused them together, turning two lost souls into a deadly pair. Long before the murder, the signs were there, ignored by a family that wanted to believe in redemption. In 2018, the courtroom in Gwinnett County was heavy with grief as Cassandra and Johnny faced justice. They pleaded guilty to the murders, sparing the family a trial, but not the pain of hearing the details. The prosecution laid out a case of calculated evil, describing how the couple planned the attack, executed it with precision, and lived among the dead without a shred of guilt. The defense tried to soften the blow, pointing to their troubled pasts, their youth, but it fell flat. The judge listened, his face growing sterner with each word, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of disgust. He called it one of the most disturbing cases he had ever seen, a betrayal so profound it defied understanding. Cassandra and Johnny were sentenced to life in prison without parole, a punishment that locked them away forever. For the family, it was closure, but not healing. The seats behind them were filled with tears, with memories of the grandparents they'd lost to such senseless violence. The murder of Wendy and Randall Bjorge is a wound that Lawrenceville still feels, a reminder that evil doesn't always announce itself with a stranger's knock. It can grow quietly, fed by resentment, hidden behind familiar faces. Wendy and Randall opened their home to Cassandra, believing they could save her, believing love could fix what was broken. Instead, they paid the ultimate price, their lives extinguished by the very person they tried to help. Today, Cassandra and Johnny sit behind bars, their youth traded for a lifetime of confinement. But for the Bjorge family, the loss is eternal. They buried two people who meant everything to them, and with them, they buried a trust in the world that may never return. This case lingers as a warning, a haunting lesson that sometimes the ones we hold closest are the ones we should fear most.